Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you've been taught about trust, about opening your heart, sharing your secrets, and relying on others has done nothing but weaken you. What if the very thing you were told makes you human is the same thing keeping you small? That's the Machiavellian paradox, and it's time we confront it head-on.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
We live in a world that worships connection. It tells us that to trust is to love, to be vulnerable is to be strong. But Machiavelli would call that dangerous idealism, the kind of belief that gets people crushed in the real world. He would argue, without hesitation, that trusting people, truly trusting them, is one of the fastest ways to lose your power. Not because people are evil, but because human nature is flawed. Because when people see weakness, many of them don't protect it. They exploit it. You've seen it. You felt it. You trusted someone with your truth, and they used it against you. You opened your heart, and they walked right in with muddy boots. You believed in someone's words, only to be betrayed by their actions. And each time it happened, a piece of you hardened. But society keeps whispering, don't lose faith in people. Machiavelli, on the other hand, would whisper, it's about time you did. This isn't about paranoia. It's about precision. It's about understanding that trust is not a virtue, it's a currency. And like any currency, it must be rationed, protected, and only invested where the return outweighs the risk. Most people throw trust around like confetti. They assume that if they trust others, they'll be trusted in return. But Machiavelli would laugh at this naivety. He understood what most never dare to admit. People are loyal to their self-interest, not your well-being. And the moment your pain becomes more useful than your peace, they will choose to betray you. So what do we do with this truth? Do we become cold, disconnected, isolated? No, we become strategic. We learn to observe before we engage. We vet before we invest. We test people's character in silence before we hand them access to our soul. Because access to you should be earned not just emotionally, but psychologically. And the more powerful you become, the more dangerous it is to trust the wrong person. Ask yourself, who knows too much about you right now? Who have you allowed behind your emotional walls without requiring proof of loyalty? Who have you given your dreams, your fears, your ambitions only to feel uneasy afterward, like you might have said too much? These are not small questions. These are survival questions. Because history is full of powerful people who fell not because of their enemies, but because they trusted the wrong friend. Machiavelli watched kings fall because they believed in the wrong advisors. He saw generals lose wars because they trusted alliances that were never real. And he saw everyday people get manipulated, destroyed, and forgotten not because they were weak, but because they assumed others were strong enough to protect what they gave. That's the heart of this philosophy. Trusting people is not inherently good or bad. It's simply dangerous. And like all dangerous things, it must be handled with care. Let's go deeper. Trust is an emotional shortcut. When we trust someone, we bypass our instincts. We stop watching. We stop analyzing. We get comfortable. And comfort is where betrayal breeds. The moment you stop checking the temperature of a relationship is the moment it starts to cool, or worse, burn you. Machiavelli would say, Never stop watching. Never stop measuring. Even the closest people in your life should be subject to quiet evaluation. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. People reveal themselves over time, not in their words, but in their patterns, in their silence, in how they treat you when they don't need you, in how they speak about others when they think you're not paying attention. And if you're too busy trusting, you miss all of it. You miss the subtle signs, the micro betrayals, the quiet shifts in tone and energy that signal a deeper truth. We're taught that mistrust is toxic. But Machiavelli would argue that blind trust is the real poison. Because mistrust, when used strategically, keeps you sharp. It keeps you awake. It forces you to look deeper, to ask better questions, to demand actions over words. And that's not cold, that's clarity. Let's address the psychological cost of broken trust. Every time someone betrays you, they don't just hurt you, they rewire you. Your nervous system starts to associate closeness with danger, vulnerability with regret. And slowly you begin to question your instincts. You begin to doubt your ability to choose good people. And that doubt is where the real weakness begins, not in the betrayal itself, but in the aftermath of losing faith in yourself. That's why Machiavelli's wisdom must be applied not just to others, but to ourselves. We must become the kind of person who doesn't need to trust easily because we are grounded deeply, who doesn't need constant reassurance because we are anchored in reality, who doesn't fear betrayal because we are prepared for it. And when you reach that level, trust becomes a tool, not a trap. Here's a question that can change your life. What would you do differently if you assumed people's loyalty was temporary? Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Would you speak less? Would you plan more? Would you hold your cards closer? Would you test before trusting, instead of trusting and hoping for the best? That shift alone can save you from 1,000 cuts. We must also address the illusion of trust in groups. Just because someone belongs to your family, your team, your community does not mean they are loyal to you. Group affiliation creates a false sense of safety. But loyalty is not inherited. It is proven. And until it is proven, it should not be assumed. Machiavelli would tell us to look at what people do when power is at stake, when money is on the table, when pressure hits. That's when true character is revealed. And if you've built your empire on soft trust, it will collapse under hard pressure. But if you've built it on tested loyalty, on quiet observation, on strategic alignment, then no betrayal can shake your foundation. So here's the truth. Trusting people will make you weak if you do it blindly, emotionally, recklessly. But trusting people strategically, cautiously, with layers of protection and conditions, that's different. That's not weakness. That's power. That's the Machiavellian way. We're told from childhood that trust is a virtue, that it's better to be open, to believe in the good of others, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But Machiavelli would rip that idea apart. Not because he believed everyone is evil, but because he understood something much more dangerous. Everyone is capable of betrayal. And if you don't calculate that truth into your reality, you are setting yourself up not just for disappointment, but for destruction. He wouldn't tell you to avoid people. He'd tell you to understand them, to know their motivations better than they know themselves, to trust not the person, but the pattern. Every person you meet is running on a hidden script, a set of values, fears, ambitions, and wounds. They may not even be conscious of it, but it drives every decision they make. And if you don't understand that script, you will trust the mask they wear instead of the engine underneath. Machiavelli would say, "Never trust the words, trust the incentives." What do they stand to gain? What do they fear losing? What would they do if they had to choose between you and their own survival? This is why trusting people too quickly will make you weak. It gives them leverage. And once someone knows you trust them blindly, they no longer fear your judgment. They no longer feel the need to prove themselves. And they may even start to disrespect the access you gave them. Because access without earning breeds entitlement, and entitlement breeds betrayal. So how do we move differently? We stop looking for people to trust and start looking for people to observe. Everyone is a case study. Everyone is a hypothesis. You don't assume someone is loyal just because they're nice. You don't assume someone is honest just because they seem confident. You watch them under pressure. You listen to how they speak about others. You study how they react when they don't get what they want. And over time, the truth reveals itself. Machiavelli would say this is not manipulation, it's wisdom. It's survival. Because the world is not made up of saints and villains. It's made up of people who are loyal to their own best interest. And the moment your presence no longer serves that interest, most people will shift. Not because they hate you, but because they are wired to protect themselves first. And if you don't understand that, you will keep handing your power to people who are not built to carry it. Let's talk about the psychology of betrayal. It rarely feels like a knife in the back at first. It feels like silence, like avoidance, like a shift in energy, like subtle sabotage. And often, by the time you realize what's happened, it's too late. That's why you must be ahead of the pattern. You must see the signs before they become stories. You must sense the misalignment before it becomes a crisis. And that sensing begins with one decision. I will no longer trust people because I want to. I will trust them because they've shown me I can. But what does that actually look like in practice? It means slowing down. It means not revealing the most sacred parts of yourself within the first few conversations. It means withholding your full truth until someone has shown consistency over time. It means creating tests not to trick people, but to see how they behave when things don't benefit them. Because trust is not romantic, it's mathematical. It's not about how you feel, it's about what you see. You see, the people who brag about how loyal they are often the ones who fold under pressure. The people who promise they'll never hurt you are often the ones who do. Machiavelli would say, "Let time reveal what words try to hide." Time is the ultimate truth serum, and the more patient you are, the more clearly you'll see who someone really is. This applies to every area of life: business, relationships, friendships, leadership. If you trust too quickly in business, you lose leverage. If you trust too quickly in love, you lose boundaries. If you trust too quickly in friendship, you lose clarity. And when you lose those things, you don't just get hurt, you get weak. You start operating from emotion instead of intelligence. You start reacting instead of leading. So how do we build strength in a world full of uncertainty? We build it by becoming unshakable regardless of who stays or who leaves. We build it by creating internal rules that protect us from external chaos. Rules like, no one gets full access to me until they've earned it. Or, I will never confuse kindness with loyalty. Or, if someone shows me who they are under pressure, I will believe them the first time. These aren't walls. They're gates, and gates can open but only for those who knock with integrity. Machiavelli would tell us that the most dangerous betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from people you trusted to protect your blind spots. And that's why trust must be conditional, earned, deliberate, slow. Because once someone has your trust, they have your blind side. And if they choose to strike, you won't see it coming, unless you were prepared. Most people aren't prepared. They confuse emotional connection with psychological safety. But just because you feel close to someone doesn't mean they're safe. Just because someone listens to your pain doesn't mean they won't use it later. And just because someone supports you today doesn't mean they'll stand with you tomorrow. People shift. Alliances evolve. And the only way to stay powerful in a shifting world is to stop building your identity on the illusion of permanent loyalty. Ask yourself this: how many decisions in your life have been shaped by the fear of losing someone's trust? How many times have you held back your truth, your ambition, your power just to avoid making someone uncomfortable? That's what blind trust costs you. It costs you your voice, your clarity, your edge. And Machiavelli would call that trade unacceptable. So what do we do instead? We build internal trust. We become people who trust our own judgment, our own instincts, our own standards. We don't wait for others to validate our direction. We don't hand our map to someone else and hope they guide us well. We lead ourselves, and we allow others to walk beside us, but only when they've proven they deserve the path. This is where real strength lies. In discernment, in patience, in the willingness to be alone rather than be surrounded by people who haven't earned your trust. And it's not lonely, it's liberating. Because when your trust is rare, it becomes powerful. And when your power is protected, it becomes lasting. There's a moment in every powerful life where silence becomes your greatest weapon. Not just silence in speech, but silence in trust. The decision to observe rather than share. To listen rather than confess. To watch how people move instead of believing what they say. This silence isn't cold, it's calculated. It's not about closing your heart. It's about protecting your throne. Because when you truly understand the fragility of trust, you stop giving it away like candy. You realize it's not a gift, it's a contract. And every contract has to be earned. Machiavelli knew the world wasn't a playground. It was a chessboard. And on that board, trusting the wrong piece could cost you the entire game. He watched alliances crumble, friendships dissolve, kingdoms fall not because of enemies, but because of misplaced faith in the wrong hands. So he built a rule that we must never forget. Trust is not a sign of strength. It is a tool of strategy. You don't trust because it's noble. You trust because it's useful. And when it stops being useful, you withdraw it. Now, this may sound harsh to some. It sounds cynical. But ask yourself this: how many times has your trust made you vulnerable to manipulation? How many times have you been blindsided by someone you thought would never hurt you? How many times have you looked back and thought, I should have seen it coming? That's not paranoia. That's the voice of your instincts, your pattern recognition, your deeper intelligence. But we drown that voice out with hope, with idealism, and with the myth that good intentions are enough. They're not. Good intentions don't protect you. Awareness does. Boundaries do. The ability to see through charm, through flattery, through emotional closeness, that's what keeps you sharp in a world where masks are more common than faces. And if you want to play this game at a high level, you need to stop asking, can I trust them? And start asking, what happens if they change? Because people do change, not always out of malice. Sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of ambition, sometimes out of survival. And if their survival ever conflicts with your stability, they will choose themselves. Not because they're evil, but because they're human. And Machiavelli would say, build for that, anticipate that, prepare for that, so that when it happens, you're not surprised, you're sovereign. Let's talk about the illusion of loyalty. Loyalty is one of the most weaponized words in human history. People demand it, they preach it, they test it. But very few people define it. What does loyalty actually mean? Is it staying with someone no matter what? Is it protecting them even when they're wrong? Is it silence in the face of betrayal? No. Loyalty, in its true form, is alignment. And alignment can shift. When someone's values, goals, or ego evolve beyond your connection, their loyalty fades even if they still say the right words. So the wise don't trust loyalty, they trust behavior. They trust consistency. They trust patterns. And when the pattern shifts, they don't ignore it. They adjust. They recalculate. They protect their inner circle like a fortress. Because Machiavelli understood this, once someone has your trust, they have your future in their hands. And not everyone has the strength to carry that weight. This is where most people fail. They think guarding their trust makes them lonely. But Machiavelli would argue the opposite. He would say that guarding your trust allows you to find the few people who are actually worthy of it. And those people, when they appear, become rare, powerful allies. Not because you gave them access easily, but because they earned it. And what is earned is always respected more than what is given. Ask yourself, who in your life has truly earned your trust? Who has proven, through time, through conflict, through silence, that they are safe ground? And who have you trusted simply because it felt good in the moment? Because they said the right things? Because they made you feel seen? That's the trap. Because manipulation often feels like intimacy, and betrayal often wears the mask of connection. So how do we move forward in a world full of masks? We cultivate internal clarity. We become the kind of person who doesn't need to trust easily because we trust ourselves deeply. We develop the ability to sit with uncertainty, to say, I don't know if I can trust this person yet, and that's okay. We don't rush the process. We let time do the filtering. We watch how someone shows up when there's nothing to gain. We observe how they speak about others behind closed doors. We notice whether they protect what you tell them, even when they're angry. These are the tests that reveal what words never can. Machiavelli believed that the strongest leaders were not those who trusted everyone, but those who made others earn the privilege of being trusted. And even then, that trust was never blind. It was always conditional, always monitored, always subject to change. Because when you tie your power to someone else's behavior, you are no longer sovereign. You are dependent. And dependence is the seed of destruction. You must become untouchable not through isolation, but through discernment. You must know who is who. You must know what they want from you, what they fear, what they hide, and you must never assume that a shared past guarantees a safe future. People don't stay the same. Neither should your levels of trust. Here's the most powerful shift you can make right now. Assume no one is forever. Not in a bitter way, but in a prepared way. Assume that every person in your life has a threshold, or a breaking point. A moment where their needs, their values, their emotions may override their loyalty to you. And instead of fearing that you plan for it, you build systems, boundaries, and emotional independence so that no matter who changes, you remain unmoved. That's what Machiavelli would call real strength. Not needing everyone to be loyal, but being strong enough to lead, to move, to dominate with or without them. That's the difference between power and popularity. Popularity needs trust. Power builds in spite of it. So let's ask one final question. If every person you trusted disappeared tomorrow, who would you become? Would your identity collapse? Would your confidence crumble? Would your mission stall? Or would you rise, clearer than ever, because your foundation was never built on people, it was built on principle? That's the Machiavellian ideal. To move through the world with open eyes and a guarded soul. To love, yes. To connect, yes. To build relationships, yes. But never to forget that trust is not security, it is risk. And you must never risk more than you're willing to lose. When you learn this, when you live this, you stop fearing betrayal. You stop chasing loyalty. You stop expecting people to be what they cannot be. And you start building a life that is unbreakable. Because it is not built on trust. It is built on truth. Yours.